You mentioned at the start too about the Australian clubs, and we could probably talk about this for hours. But where are the
Mm,
Australian clubs at? Sydney FC have been the dominant force in Australia for the last 3 or 4 years now. Have won just one of their last 19 games in the
mm,
Champions League. Perth have lost both of their opening games this
mm,
season, while Melbourne Victory, like Sydney FC, have disappointed in recent years. We know this will come to affect the slot allocation
mm,
for A
mm,
League clubs, and as it stands, they're more likely to be playing in the AFC Cup in a few years' time than the Asian Champions League.
mm.
So why do Australian clubs struggle so much? And do you see any signs of life amongst the three teams this year?
I think it's quite a difficult question to answer. I think, and I think this is the sort of thing that's sort of been it's been sort of talked to death in some respects as well. Salary cap doesn't help,
Hmm.
obviously, and I know I read a lot of the Australian press, and every time, particularly they play against the Chinese club, it's big spending this, money bags that, blah blah blah. Which you and I have talked about this any number of times before, whether on the podcast or privately. I mean, it's there's a perception and there's a reality, but the the reality is, yes, the A League clubs are up against it when they do play against. You play against a club like Vissel Kobe. They've got Andres Iniesta, who's earning silly money now. Lots of people have sort of thrown numbers around about what he could or couldn't be on, but he's probably on more than every single player is paid in total in the A League. I mean, silly numbers. So yes, you do have some clubs in Asia which have crazy sums of money behind them, and you were able to attract some incredibly high quality talent. But I don't think that's enough of a reason. I think scheduling of seasons is an issue. I think travel. I think travel. I mean, no clubs in Asia, excuse me, no clubs in Asia have the challenge from a travel perspective that Australian clubs have. If you're a Japanese club, a Korean club, a Chinese club, and you have an A League club in your Champions League group, okay, you have to go to Australia once. But you're an A League club and you have a Japanese club, a Chinese club, and a Korean club, or Japanese, Korean, and Thai, or whatever. Well, that's three times that you have to leave. That mounts up. On top of that, you're playing in a league which there's a fair amount of travel involved. Okay, maybe Melbourne to Sydney's maybe not a huge distance, but Melbourne to Perth, Sydney to Perth,
Yeah.
that's a huge distance. And look, again, Australian clubs are not the only ones that have that. That's a big issue in the Chinese Super League. But a Guangzhou Evergrande or a Shanghai Shenhua or a Beijing Guoan can afford. These are clubs that are well enough structured and well enough financed that the players, if they want, they can fly. They can fly on charter jets. They could fly business class on internal on commercial flights. The A League clubs are not doing that.
Yeah.
And these are all little things that all mount up, and they affect players' conditioning. And I also think there's I'm still not 100% convinced that the Champions League itself is held in high enough regard within the game in Australia, because Australia is quite an insular nation and quite a and the A League. I mean, even listening to what a lot of players and coaches have been saying prior to leaving Australia, or even just after arriving in Doha, a lot of the talk has been, whether it's questioning from the media or whether it's just talk that they're having themselves. They're talking about this. Yes, they're playing in the Champions League, but they're talking about this as pre-season for the A League,
Mm.
and I don't think they're doing it to be disrespectful to the competition, because I don't think that's the motivation or the mentality at all. I think it's almost default.
It is just it
Yeah,
is their
and it
preseason.
is exactly. And so for this competition in particular, I mean, I think as we sort of touched on earlier, you know, Sydney are probably the team who are least affected by a lot of the sort of the close season upheaval. Okay, they haven't replaced Lafondra, but they've got a squad that's pretty much intact otherwise. Um, Steve Corrigan is now into his third season as head coach, and has been very successful and is doing very well. Um, they played well against Shanghai SPG in the first 45. In the first half, they should have been two up, and they could have been three up. Alex Wilkinson hit the post. There was an
Bugger
earlier
Crickers
chance.
missed a glorious
Oh, I
mistake.
mean, he should have buried that. He really should have buried that. I mean, he got away with it because 4 minutes later, Bahajir scored and okay, 1-0, and it kind of gets forgotten about. But when you look back on it, they could have been 3-0 up against a big spending Chinese Super League club who had most, if not all, of their crown jewels on the pitch at the time. So I think Sydney are a good side. I like watching them. I watched several games towards the tail end of the season in the playoffs. I watched the grand final game. I think Cork has got a really good side, and I think if they were playing on a more even playing field in terms of the travel, in terms of timing and fitness and everything else, they give other teams a run for their money. But then you look at your club, Melbourne Victory. I mean, you know, they had a terrible season last season.
Huge turnover in the squad as well.
Huge turnover in the squad, which is still kind of ongoing because they're turning up in Doha and there are players landing in Doha who have never even linked up with the squad before. So Grant Brebner is in a position where he's effectively meeting his entire squad for the first time 3 or 4 days before they play their next game in the Champions League. I mean, that's just it is the situation, and there's not a lot that can be done about it, and especially because they're bringing players from England. It makes sense. Players like Callum McManaman makes sense. Meet us in Doha and we'll do it from there. But in terms of what they can do at this competition, it makes it harder. Perth Glory are in a similar position. They've got a new coach with Richard Garcia. In his first game, he played 5 debutants. 8 of the players who started. I'm going for what I read in the West Australian. I'm not pretending that I'm a Perth Glory expert, but according to them, it was also 8 players who either were current or former academy players. So you're looking at a squad that's very young, very untested, and still yet to settle, with a coach who is still trying to instill in his squad his ideas, the way he wants to play. They're not going to be fully fit. They're playing in a different environment. They're doing the whole bubble thing. It's difficult, right? It's very, very difficult. And you know, you look at, I mean, Perth are bottom of their group. They're in with Shanghai Shenhua, FC Tokyo, and Ulsan Hyundai. It's challenging, you know. And I think losing a coach like Tony Popovich, I think, you know, somebody who had the experience of winning the Champions League in 2014 with Western Sydney Wanderers, had done well with Perth over the couple of seasons that he was working there, and to lose a big character like that, somebody who you know will really sort of stamp his imprint on the squad and on the players and the way in which they play, and to have a new guy coming in, that's hard. That's hard. So to get to your broader point, your bigger point in terms of, again, I mean, it's a big challenge, I think, for Australian clubs. I think it's a big challenge for the A-League and Australian football in general to have this, to position themselves and the timing of the season to be a little bit more compatible with playing in the Champions League. I don't think it's important enough, I think, for many of the clubs, because I think A-League's the bread and butter commercially, ultimately. The money that they bring in to be able to pay the players and everything else ultimately is down to A-League success, A-League exposure at home, and the Champions League in many respects is a cost and is a distraction. And you know, there needs to be fundamental change for that to move on from there.